Well, hello and welcome to the stream. Let's go ahead and see what we can get into. We're going to do a little bit of Art Bell, January 27th, 1998.
I can't tell you how I knew, but I did know there were others I came very near. I knew I was outnumbered. I also realized that I was in a grove. I was a very isolated area. It was just starting to get dark. No one could have heard me. No one knew where I was. And it was like, you idiot, what are you doing? It was that moment of truth. I literally turned while I was running and ran the opposite direction. I must have run a good mile and a half through that grove.
Now you're cooking. That's what I would have done.
Right, I'm cooking, boy. I'm running as fast as I can. I ran all the way up to the road, crawled underneath the barbed wire fence, and then walked, I would say, about a half a mile to my apartment. Now, you know, people often say they would love to have an encounter like this, and it's true, but you fight a lot of things, right? At this point, I was fighting myself. I knew what I had seen. I had had a lot of time to observe this creature. There were a lot of different things working in this encounter: the smell, the stench, the fact that there were two creatures, not one.
And yet you reported this at that time to nobody.
No, I walked in, I can remember, I walked in this apartment, my heart is racing, my adrenaline is pumping, and it's like, who are you going to call, the Ghostbusters?
Right.
You can't call the police. You can't very well pick up the phone and say, hi, Mom, I got to tell you something.
No.
And yet it is the most phenomenal thing that has just happened. I paced around the apartment for a few minutes, and I have a friend that I had met several years before. Her name is Linda. And I remembered that at one point, Linda had told me, this was many years ago, she and her husband had been driving late one night in a region not too far from Gulf Breeze. They spotted a UFO, which came directly over their car. Their car stopped. They were paralyzed with fear. A beam of light came down, and then there is something like 3.5 to 4 hours missing time. I remember that she had told me this in confidence, and at the time I was fascinated with it, but we never went any further than that. So she was the person I called.
Somebody who would at least understand.
Exactly.
Sure.
Exactly, because I knew I was in shock. I knew what I had seen was accurate. I sure didn't want to blow years of credibility as a wildlife writer.
Yeah.
So I called this individual, and we were on the phone for quite a while that night, going over it and over it, and she had no problem whatsoever believing it.
Have you had any artists do a rendition? I mean, you are so descriptive about the creature, both the creatures, that it seems to me you could sit down with an artist and come up with a rendition of what you saw.
There are 2 sketches that I did in Unknown magazine, this magazine that is coming out, hitting the stands. I did them both. One is of this being alone, as I looked at him right away, and the second one is the being with the creatures. I accidentally forgot to tell you one other thing that occurred while we were running down this grove together. While we were running, I distinctively heard over and over and over again through telepathy, and it was said as one word, "Viente, viente." Now, I am not Spanish, I am not Italian, I don't speak any other languages but English. I understood that word meant, welcome, come hither. It was like, come on. Like I said, I can't verify what language that is, or I don't speak any other languages besides the English language.
Well, we've had a lot of people out there who do. Katie,
Piente.
I want to hold you over for a few moments after the top of the hour and sort of finish this up. So stay right where you are.
Okay.
All right. Katie Frankovich from Florida. I'm Marvell. This is Coast to Coast AM. Went into sort of a doggy catatonic state. She watched this creature with 6 digits on each hand, and then she got up and actually ran with it until she reached a kind of covering and ran into a completely unbearable smell. Now, that's not a fair description for those of you who have just joined the show. It's inadequate. She described this creature in great detail. In fact, the audience is reacting very favorably. Aren't fascinating? Your guest is reacting positively with a voice stress indicator. I detect some modest anxiety, appropriate, which may or may not be recognized overtly. And just generally, as I go through the faxes, people believe you, Katie. They absolutely believe you. It's the way you tell the story. It's the detail you're giving. And it's an astounding story.
Thank you. It is true. There's nothing made up in it at all. There was a second encounter. I don't know whether you want to get into this or not.
Briefly, if you would.
Okay. You had asked my reaction directly afterward. Very briefly, the next morning I was up at the crack of dawn, and I had all 4 of my dogs in that grove. Went back to the site, and yes, the branches had been broken off the tree. They were not on the ground. I traced the whole journey, but I could not enter that tunnel. And the smell was gone. Everything was gone. Shortly afterwards, and I can't tell you exactly how long it was. I would say it was within a period of a couple of weeks. Could have even been closer. I was sitting one night on the couch. It was between 11 o'clock and 11:30 because I had the news on. I had the television sound turned down. The window open. The couch was about 10 feet away from the front window. The only light on in the apartment was the television, and I was on the phone talking to my friend Linda. Outside of my front window, which as I said was open, there was a lamp on the lawn. It stood up about 4 feet tall, and it just lit up the front area. While I was talking to Linda on the phone, I looked up, and a very strange thing began happening. It appeared to be like a mint green dew or a cloud filling the apartment up towards the ceiling and was coming down the walls. And as I was talking to Linda, I said to her, "You're not going to believe what's going on here, but I'm going to describe it to you, what I'm seeing." It got fairly thick. I mean, it was definitely mint green, and it was hovering across the entire ceiling of the living room. The 4 dogs were asleep on the floor, like 4 wonderful attack dogs. And out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement over at the window. And I looked over, and now I could only see from the chest up, because it's not a floor-length window. This is a regular window. Obviously standing on the porch, was one of them leaned over and looked in the window, and then steps was centered right back in the window. There were actually 2 of them. One was smaller. For some reason, I identified the one looking in the window as being female. Her features or characteristics were the same as the one I had seen in the grove. But it was very obvious from her face that she was a female. The one behind her came up to probably where our shoulder blades would be in our back.
Right.
And I assumed that this was an adolescent. And for some reason, I perceived this adolescent as being male. He stood behind her. He was very timid, very timid. Once in a while, he would peek out from behind her and look at her. And remember, I am describing all of this to Linda on the phone as it is occurring.
Right.
I'm trying to keep my voice down. I don't scare them. Linda was scared out of her wits. She wanted to call the police. I said, no, please don't move. I want this. I want to see them. The female standing at the window stood there staring at me curiously as she moved her head back and forth a few times. It was priceless. It was one of the most precious impressions I have in my memory. At one point, she took her hand and placed it on the screen, facing me. And there were the 6 digits.
6 digits.
With the fingers spread. Now, when she did this, I said to Linda, she's got her hand on the screen, the 6 digits are up there. And I said, I don't want to scare her. So I'm going to raise my right hand slowly in the air like I'm extending it to touch hers. And this I did, and I held it there. And she tilted her head, the one at the window, and looked at me very curiously. I knew instinctively she knew what I was doing. A little one behind her peeked around her, looked over at me. I would say we held that position for maybe 20, 30 seconds.
Is there any question in your mind if you had an encounter?
No, none at all. In fact, the government agents did me a great favor when they tried to interrogate me because it reinforced everything.
So if you had government agents that came and visited you,
Absolutely.
presented you with a card with the White House?
Yeah, it was a regular. Let me just finish this second encounter very quickly. I'll go into the government agents. There's a thing here that has always fascinated me about this. While we had our hands up in the air, I perceived through telepathy very strong over and over again the word protector of life. And it was in English, protector of life. And I understood that this was how they regarded me. This was said over and over again. I understood that this would be like my name. You call me KT, but this would be the way they identified me.
I understand.
I put my hand down, and so did she. And after several moments, I observed her turn and not walk away with that hop. I could see her hop.
Right.
With the little one. And I said to Linda at this point, Linda, they just left. Hold on, I'm going outside. I want to see if they're still there. Of course, Linda's having a heart attack. I can't stand this. But I did go outside and there was nothing. They were gone.
Not even any tracks.
No. Well, you couldn't see it was at night.
All right. We're going to have to free here. How in the world, who came to see you and how did they know to come and see you?
They didn't come to the apartment. It would happen within, I would say, 2 days. I was in that grove again. And I looked up and saw this black government car coming towards me, which startled me because I wasn't used to seeing people in the grove. There were 2 men in the car. They were dressed in business suits. They pulled up right next to me. Of course, I had the dogs with me. And they rolled out the window, and the first question out of their mouth was, have you ever seen anything strange in this grove? And I said, I played dumb. I said, what do you mean strange? I saw a wild goose here one time. And they said, no. You would know what we meant. You would absolutely know what we meant. Now, they tried very hard to get me to tell them if I had ever seen anything. They asked my name. They took my phone number. They gave me their business card. And on this card, it had a telephone number. They put their beeper number on it, instructed me to call them any time of day or night. And in the right-hand corner of this card was a raised emblem of the White House, but that emblem was in gold. In other words, the White House was gold.
Right.
There wasn't anything on the card to indicate which branch of government they were from, but they did introduce themselves as government agents.
Well, it'd be gold embossing, so I'm not surprised the White House would be shown on a card like that to be gold.
They were, every time I went in the Grove, they would drive up and greet me. My feeling was that I don't think they actually saw what occurred. I do think they knew something was there.
That something had happened.
Yes, I think that they figured I had probably seen something.
Obvious question, do you still have that card?
I had it, in fact, I had showed it to Linda and her husband Bob, who was a retired policeman. I had even called the number to find out what would happen. The telephone was answered with just yes. I had it, I was saving it, and along came Andrew in August of 1992, and I lost everything but the clothes on my back card.
Hurricane Andrew wiped you out.
Yes.
All right, I asked you this earlier. Let's return to this now. The alien autopsy, the autopsy of these creatures with 6 digits, and very much like you described, the torsos, even the thighs, the legs, the head, is the creature you saw, the creature we saw in the alien autopsy.
I remember seeing that film. That film happened a couple of years after this incident. In fact, I saw it up here in the Ocala National Forest after I had moved from Andrew. That was the first time it was aired on television. I sat there and watched that film with my mouth open. I could not get my eyes off the picture, especially when I saw the legs. The only thing that I would say was different was I had remembered the arms as being more without muscle tone, more emaciated looking.
Right.
But something occurred to me. This was a dead body that I was looking at in the film.
Yes.
When you think of a dead body, rigor mortis sets up. And because you don't know the chemical makeup behind this body, you don't know whether there was bloating in that body or not. So that's a question that remains unanswered in my mind. Why were the arms different? That could be a possible answer. I don't know.
Well, your powers of observation are very acute indeed. And your story seems probably one of the most detailed I've ever heard. What I would love to have from you, if it's possible, is perhaps some of the drawings that you have done, some artist rendition of all of this that we might get up on the website for everyone to see. Would that be possible?
Absolutely. You can have the 2 pictures that are coming out in the magazine. And afterward, there was similar I began drawing. In fact, I have one painted right outside my door now. It's a wheel. It looks very much like the peace sign, but it's made of leaves, and all the leaves are attached, joined to one another in the center. It's done in blue and green. And for some reason, I started painting this after these encounters, and I have never lived in a home without this outside my door. And I would be glad to even forward that to you.
Absolutely remarkable, Katie. Do you have my address?
No, I don't.
Do you have a pencil?
Yes, I do.
All right, are you ready?
I'm ready.
It is Art Bell, of course. Post Office Box.
Right.
4755.
4755.
In a little town called Perot. That's P as in Paul, A-H. R-U-M-P.
R-U-M-P.
Nevada.
Right.
Zip code 89041. -4755, and we'll get this up for everybody to see.
I would like to just add one more thing, Art, because I'm very interested in this too. I do have an email address,
All right.
and I would like to give it to your listeners. I am very interested in particularly if the others have had encounters like this.
Many have.
You can email me at K, the letter K, FRNKOVICH at AOL.com. It's KFRNKOVICH at AOL.com.
KFRNKOVICH
at AOL.com.
Well, you'll get lots of email, that's for sure.
Thank you, sir.
And I'll look forward to getting the drawings, which will go up on the website right away. Katie, you have been a real joy to have on. I've never had anybody with such a wonderfully descriptive way about her.
Well, thank you very much. And I just wanted to say I'm very glad that I was able to break the story on your show, done in a very professional manner, because it is very true and very real indeed.
Katie, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Good night. That's Katie Frankovich, and it is the most detailed, a careful description of an encounter with somebody, something from elsewhere that I think I've ever heard. That along with Travis Walton and Betty and Barney Hill and others of the same ilk. Absolutely remarkable. Plans to eliminate all manned missions to the moon and Mars. This is a remarkable development. I was sent this Gannett News Service story by Richard C. Hoagland, who we now have on the telephone from New Mexico, from KLB country in New Mexico, Albuquerque. And I cannot fathom in my wildest dreams how this could possibly be. Now, recall that Tom Van Flanderen, who's always been, what's the right word? I think very cautious in his pronouncements regarding Cydonia, who is responsible for much of the imaging that's coming up, is preparing America, preparing the world for the fact that the things at Cydonia, the artifacts at Cydonia, the place on Mars, is not a natural item. It seems like the very last time you would announce that you are not going to send men to Mars, and yet in this Gannett News Service article, it's very clear that we have decided suddenly at exactly this very strange time in our history to not leave the planet. It's almost as though we have been prohibited from leaving our planet's atmosphere, or at least certainly touching down on any other body, the moon, Mars, whatever. Some sort of prime directive at work. I don't know, in reverse perhaps. Here is an Ekstrom Science Award winner, a one-time advisor to Walter Cronkite, Kelly, and NASA, Richard C. Hoagland. Richard, welcome to the program here at the bottom of the hour.
Good morning. We have, 30 seconds?
Yeah, not a lot of time. But I mean, first of all, just confirm for me this Gannett News Service article. Why in the world would we suddenly not leave planet Earth?
Well, look at the date, all right? This was Eske's letter, which is the acting associate administrator for spaceflight for NASA headquarters.
Right.
He sent this letter dated January 9th. What happened January 9th?
I don't know.
And I'll give you a clue. It has nothing to do with Monica, all right?
All right.
That's the date that Prospector arrived at the moon.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Well, there is so much to get into. Obviously, all we can do in the next minute is just a tease. But, we are in charge here of a very wide, broad investigation, which began 15 years ago for me. I have some very good people in a wide variety of fields working on this, literally on several different continents now connected by the internet. And it ranges from the science to the politics to everything in between.
Maybe we should be revisiting the whole Cydonia question. It's astounding that Tom Van Flanderen would suddenly suggest that what is at Cydonia is, as you have always said, not natural. I mean, just astounding. Here we've got a spacecraft about to begin imaging.
Well, it's even more astounding because there was a secret meeting at NASA headquarters last November 24th, and that's why Tom is making these very bold pronouncements.
All right, hold tight. We'll be right back. Charles in Albuquerque, viente in Spanish means come. It is the familiar or non-formal friendly form of the word. In other words, come, friend. And so Katie Frankovich was running along with somebody was saying, or something that was saying, come, friend. In a moment coming up, once again, Richard C. Hoagland, and we are going to discuss Cydonia, something very early and very dear to his research, and now, of course, the incredible news that apparently what is at Cydonia is not natural. This from Tom Van Flanderen, who was so conservative on the issue, will ask why the sudden courage. Are you having arthritis pain? In Albuquerque, and you mentioned it at the top of this fax that you sent, Richard, the sudden courage of Van Flanderen with regard to what is at Cydonia. Where is it coming from?
Well, this is such a complex political situation. We had the State of the Union tonight. I have talked with David Oates a few minutes ago. I actually woke him up after you called me and wanted me to do something on this issue. And the very last statement that Clinton made at the end of the speech has a remarkable reference to NASA in the most amazing context. And as you obviously are aware, David is working on it tomorrow and should probably have the entire speech done sometime the next day or so. And I would strongly recommend that we do something together on this because it's looking more and more like we have two realities here. We have the reality that we're seeing on CNN and in the joint, House Senate State of the Union address, and then we have the real reality behind the scenes that everybody in the know knows about, except us, the American people, who should know. And this release from NASA, which was run by Gannett today, based on a letter issued by the acting administrator of NASA for spaceflight on January 9th, is just another data point that the fix is in. Human race is effectively quarantined. And my model for what's going on is that we've had for many, many years, 30 years, we've had the in crowd, deep level at NASA that knew these secrets and everybody else who didn't. And how can you possibly have an agency where a tiny group of people know crucial things and the rest don't? The answer is control of information, control of data. If you control the data and you only give the 20 or 30,000 honest people free digested path, the things that you want them to know, right? And keep all the good stuff and the deep file cabinets and behind the double steel locked doors marked top secret burn before reading. Obviously, you can go on with the charade for a long time. But what's happening now, because, and I really have to take some credit here for Enterprise doing this, appearing at Ohio State, being invited to the UN, doing briefings at NASA centers, we have for the last, several years, since 1988, been invited in the NASA front door, 5 times officially. Right. And it wasn't just jump out of a cake and yell boo. I mean, these people wanted to know what we, as an independent investigation, have been finding out. Well, obviously, what's happening is that the honest guys began to suspect that they weren't getting the whole truth. So, of course, instead of leveling with the American people, what they have been doing quietly since '88 is building their own programs to go and verify what people like us, independent investigations, have been claiming. And in the last several years, under Dan Golden, we've had faster, better, cheaper, smarter, quicker, meaner, that whole litany, right? Right. And those missions have now been going places and sending back data to the honest crowd, the middle of the curve. And we've had several missions now that have, sent back some pretty amazing things. Pathfinder this past summer, we've had several programs on your show dealing with what Pathfinder really has found versus what NASA claims officially is found. And on January 9th, this quick $63 million, from nowhere, sudden prospector mission to the moon, this unmanned mission, this half-box spacecraft, to reach the moon on January 9th. Within hours of it reaching there, this letter is fired out to all centers, and I will quote it because it's pretty amazing.
Please do.
I am directing the centers, effective immediately, to issue termination notices for all contractual vehicles associated with beyond Earth orbit activities, such as human, lunar, or Mars exploration.
That is a quarantine.
The fix is in. The question now is only how does the American people get control not only of the space program, but control of this government?
All right, what job, what slot does Van Flandern actually fill with regard to the Mars mission underway right now?
I'm glad you brought that up because you slightly misspoke a few minutes ago. Tom is not officially connected with NASA. Tom was the former head of the Celestial Mechanics branch for the U.S. Naval Observatory. He participated in many important projects, most significant of which was the search for Planet X, planet beyond Pluto. And he was indirectly involved with the discovery of the moon, Charon, that orbits Pluto by Christie back in 1978. He has left the government. Tom runs a private research think tank called the Meta Research Foundation in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Tom has been doing independent studies as part of this loose confederation of scientists that have been looking at this data, for many years now, particularly in terms of Mars. And his claim to fame, as you know, because of the programs we have done, has been his independent model that we live in a solar system where there has been major structural change. Planets flown to kingdom come by immense vast forces in geologic time. And that Mars is in fact the moon. Not a planet in its own right, but the remnant moon that formerly orbited a gas giant planet that used to exist where Mars currently orbits.
Yes.
And the elliptical nature of the Mars orbit is a remnant of the celestial mechanics of its primary going away and Mars being kind of left without a dance partner to sail around the sun. Tom has been extremely conservative, given his government background, given his PhD, given his Yale, history of education and all that, in terms of the Sidonia hypothesis, in terms of our work on Mars and on the moon. Up until this meeting a few days ago of the American Astronomical Association, where based on his own work and collaborations, we had many conversations, he has suddenly been emboldened to basically stand in front of this prestigious group of astronomers, his colleagues, and declare that from his analysis, obviously building on the work of others, there is a more than 50-50 chance, probably 90-10, the face on Mars and the surrounding things are artificial.
You must feel very vindicated.
Well, the reason, let's leave me out of the equation for a minute. Let me tell you what has emboldened Tom. And why, unfortunately, I think Dr. Van Flandern's faith in NASA, as well as the other participants in this secret meeting I talked about at the bottom of the hour, has been woefully misplaced, as evidenced by this directive from Richard Wisniewski, acting Associate Administrator for Spaceflight for NASA headquarters. Back in November 24th, there were 4 or 5 people that were invited to a very interesting secret meeting in NASA headquarters. The meeting was held with a gentleman named Carl Pilker, who is the acting director of the Solar System Exploration Committee for NASA. This is a committee, high-level NASA committee that basically runs all of spaceflight, looking at the planetary studies all over the solar system. The nearest spacecraft, which is going to Eros, the Prospector mission that arrived at the moon, of course, the Pathfinder mission, etc. He took over from the previous head, who died in a very mysterious way last summer, just a couple of days after we had done a show on Pathfinder.
I recall that, yes.
Okay, Dr. Jurgen Ray. Carl Pilker is a very well-known astronomer. He used to be at the University of Hawaii. He's written some pretty amazing papers on solar system studies. He's a first-rate scientist. And he apparently, at the behest of Stan McDaniel, Mark Carlotto, David Webb, and Vince DiPietro, was convinced to take a meeting with them, with a couple members of his staff at headquarters on the afternoon of the 24th of November. I was conspicuously not invited to the meeting, so I want to put that right on the table, okay? Sure. During this meeting, from sources which have relayed this to us, and from things that have been published on the web, from Carlotto and from Michael Lindemann, apparently what Dr. Filker said was that he was extremely impressed with the work of McDaniel, Carlotto, and company, that this had lifted this whole subject far out of the realm of the tabloid representations that he had been familiar with, and made him and NASA realize that, oh my God, this is real science. And that, as a matter of course, they were going to take Dr. McDaniel's suggestion. Remember, Dr. McDaniel was the chairman of the Department of Philosophy at Sonoma State University. He wrote a voluminous review of our work and many of the other independent investigators back in 1992-93, and it was published within days of the disappearance of Mars Observer. And he has been basically on NASA's case ever since to do it right, to whether replacement spacecraft arrive, publish orbits to announce when the Sidonia opportunities would be, basically available to prioritize photographing Sidonia with Dr. Mallon's camera on this spacecraft at high resolution, 1 meter more or less, and to basically do science as opposed to ignoring the subject. Sure. And Dr. Mallon, who is the principal investigator on the camera, has consistently, publicly on his website, which is linked to our website at enterprisemission.com, through your website, rfl.com, has said that he's totally uninterested in Sidonia. It's all a trick of light and shadow. The base is out there. The geometry's out there. It's not science. It's a bunch of us voodoo priests making weird noises in the dark, and he's doing science. Yes. This meeting in November basically claimed to have repudiated Dr. Malin's position. Carl Filker said to these 4 or 5 people, we don't agree with Dr. Malin. We, in fact, intend to follow you, Dr. McDaniel's prescription, and we're going to take photographs of Sidonia on every opportunity. We're going to publicize this. We're going to put them on the web, basically live, and we're going to do everything that you have wanted us to do. And, of course, you can imagine these guys jumping up and down. Of course. What was really surprising, given NASA's postponement of the official mapping mission for a full year. Remember, the spacecraft arrived last September 11th, when we did our Pasadena conference. Aero break. It was aero braking very nicely, and then something went wrong, and they had to slow down the aero braking dramatically because of this front solar panel that flexes dangerously past the limit.
They actually said something about the Mars atmosphere having expanded.
In one orbit, a 145-hour orbit, it had doubled in density and doubled. This is kind of mysterious, and you can get into all kinds of reasons, but that's kind of technical, so we don't need to go there tonight. The point is that instead of arriving in the mapping orbit in March of this year, March of 1998, NASA announced a few months ago that it would take another year to get into the right orbit, March of 1999. Right. So one of the surprises, one of the shocking surprises of this secret meeting, and it was secret because it was very closely held by all the participants, including NASA, was that they would be in a position to begin to do mapping in this still very elliptical orbit as the spacecraft dips down to about 150 miles above Mars, the low point. The orbital dynamics will bring that orbit into position to photograph Sidonia beginning in early March of this year. Now, obviously, hearing all of this from my sources, and I've had, as Trump used to tell us, 3 sources. Well, we have 3 independent sources, so we know the meeting took place, we know the promises were made, and of course, I'm very skeptical of the promises because this agency has not got a sterling track record of being on the level of the American people. So I'm very skeptical until I hear a crucial point that comes out of this meeting. Vince DiPietro is in the meeting. Remember, Vince DiPietro is the partnership with Greg Molinar, correct? The 2 NASA engineers working for Lockheed back in 1979 rediscovered in the files at Goddard space photograph and began their own independent work, and I cite voluminously their work in the Monuments to Mars, which is my chronicle of all of this activity going back to the very beginning. Pietro's in the meeting. Carl Pilker apparently turns to Pietro and he says, Betsy said, by the way, he says, if these two photographs, which we're going to begin in March, confirm what is there, you will get the credit for the discovery. Really? Now, this piece of information, to me, has an interesting ring to it. Because for one thing, it's incredibly politics. The actual discoverer of the face on Mars is a scientist, an astronomer named Tobias Owen. Remember, if you read in Monuments, it was Toby Owen who was pouring through the, in essence, Polaroids from Viking back in that summer of 1976, who found the face on Mars on the floor in the photographs that they were trying to mosaic, and who on that Sunday afternoon exclaimed to Jerry Soppin, oh my God, look at this.
Sure.
So the fact that Carl Pilker, head of Solar System Exploration at headquarters, is promising to Pietro that he will get the nod as the discoverer is really kind of interesting from several different perspectives. Not the least of which, of course, is Vince's role in this discussion over the years and his personal reactions against certain other investigators in terms of the long-standing, unfolding politics of who's doing what and when, vis-a-vis Sidonia. And it was this piece of information that, frankly, made me believe strongly that, in fact, this time it was for real. Needs someone that they can control, who politically will sit on the talk shows and on Nightline or whatever, on your show perhaps, and say what the party line is going to be after we've gone past these realers of Emirax. The real war, the real issue, the real interest, of course, is what the heck does it mean? Who's down there? What did it? How long do they live there? Did they come to Earth? All those questions, which I discuss at great length in Monuments and do some speculating at the end of the book. Those are the questions that NASA needs to totally control the dialogue on if it's going to move to the next level in this interesting political game.
Van Flannery's new courage and everything else taken into consideration, no matter whose discovery it is, how likely is it, in your opinion now, Richard, that these objects, the face, the other objects in the Sidonia region are simply not natural, were put there by somebody somewhere?
Years ago, I passed that threshold. There's no doubt in my mind that we're dealing with an artificial complex, and one of the reasons is because of what Pathfinder found. I mean, Pathfinder landed in the middle of a second city, but that's a whole other discussion. The point is that I have tried to tell from various sources these people in that meeting, including Tom, don't get their hopes up. Even in promising to Pietro he'd get the nod, there was a part of me which said, wait a minute, this is not going down the way the 20 years leading up to it have mandated we should look at this. And I'm trying to caution them not to get their hopes up. Well, this letter from, Mr. Wisnowski, the acting administrator for spaceflight,
Effectively quarantining mankind.
Exactly. It tells me that the fix is in. And what we're going to see in March, if we see anything at all, will be probably fake photographs. And they have these people now out on the stuff, the lecture circuit, on the internet, or whatever, basically touting the honesty and the integrity of the scientific verisimilitude of NASA, which of course is part of the shell game. This is part of the con. This is part of the lie. You're dealing with people that think of us, the American people who are paying for it, and somewhere down the food chain, slightly above the microbes. And there is a very strong perception tonight on my part that we are being had. That you're not being told the truth from the president on down on this issue. And if I needed any confirmation, it came when I woke poor David Oates up out of sound sleep.
What was the reference, Richard, to NASA?
Very end, Clinton is talking about the Constitution and the documents preserving for the 21st century. And he says, NASA feels lost with it.
NASA feels lost with it. That was a reversal.
That was a reverse.
All right, hang tight. We'll be back to you at the top of in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Richard, the following facts in. I share Richard Hoagland's shock over NASA's sudden decision to terminate all activities related to human exploration beyond low Earth orbit. But please be advised that Richard is wrong about the date on which lunar prospector arrived on the moon. It went into orbit early on the 11th, not the 9th. My guess is the decision was political, just like the Glenn announcement. NASA and the White House want to focus our attention on the International Space Station. When Clinton talked about the, quote, vast ocean of space, end quote, last night, he failed to mention that we have no plan to leave the safe harbor of Earth orbit. That's Bill Milberg, author of Moon Missions. Richard?
Well, all right, they launched on the 6th, and it was a 3-day orbit to the moon, and I have not checked actually when they got there. But let's assume for a minute that Mr. Melbourne is accurate, right? And my interesting suspicion here is that if he is accurate, then this was a preemptive strike. In other words, what you got to remember is that the Prospector mission is supposed to be scouting the moon for moon base, scouting the moon for resources.
Water, I believe water, right?
Well, that's the MacGuffin, all right? If they confirm the water at Clementine as far back as 1994, with the bistatic radar experiment strongly suggested is at the pole, between the South Pole of the moon, in that deep, dark, forever night crater where it's cold trapped, then a moon base becomes incredibly easy by current contemporary technological standards. Even Carl Sagan, on his last Midnight appearance, the night, a few nights before Carl died,
yes,
he sat there on the show with Ted, and he said, if there is water, it makes human occupation of the moon much easier. In fact, he was at something else, which was bizarre because it makes no sense at all. He said it opens up the prospect, albeit small, of life, which makes no sense at all because you're not going to have microbes living on the moon. The only life that water on the moon would open up would be colonization, the kind of thing that we've been looking at now for several years. So what was Dr. Sagan trying to say a few days before he left us? This letter is so antithetical to what NASA's been telling us. I mean, this $63 million mission is supposed to go there and assay the resources of the moon, not just for science, not just for the lunar selenologists to figure out how the moon got there and how it evolved, but primarily in the minds of a lot of people, at Houston in particular, for moon-based studies. There are actually ongoing plans that Dr. Golden has set in motion. And suddenly, if this gentleman is correct, days before they even got there, the rug is yanked out from all those plans because it doesn't matter how much water there is. If you don't have the vehicles in the pipeline, the development of the technology to go and make use of it, it means nothing. Nothing at all.
It just doesn't make sense.
It makes no sense at all. Unless, as I keep saying, and I sounded like redundant mantra, the fix is in. One of the things that I and my colleagues have been working on very quietly behind the scenes, preparing for not only publication on the web, but also for a major show, probably on your program, Art, is to move our attention from Mars back to the moon, now that we have Prospector in orbit. While a lot of people's attention have been focused on Mars, and we have been encouraging that, looking at the Pathfinder pictures, the leaks and all of that, there has been a quiet group of people, part of Enterprise, whose names we will reveal shortly and who I would like to bring on as guests, who are doing some stunningly important work, going through the archives, doing the grunt work on the photographs that we began looking at many years ago in NASA's own files. And they have turned up such astonishingly, incredibly impressive things that we're almost ready for prime time. And what I wanted to do in the next month or two, after we really knew that we had a spacecraft giving us data, was to do a show with you and simultaneously with the web, laying out what we know is there. I never imagined that we would be kicking it off, tonight with this announcement in the last couple of days that we have basically decided to stay at the shores, not even venture into the deep ocean, and we're turning our backs on this idea of going back to the moon.
What has happened to us? I mean, what has happened to us?
Well, it's even more bizarre because only a month ago, this is what, the evening of the morning of the 28th now.
That's right.
A few days ago, about a month ago, in December, just around Christmas, Gene Cernan and Jack Smith, astronaut Cernan, who, as everyone knows, was the commander of Apollo 17, and Jack Smith, who was the first and last geologist to ever make it to the moon, Caltech graduate, resident of New Mexico, senator from New Mexico, and
Yes.
they stood at a press conference in Washington and basically talked about this resurgence of interest in going back to the moon. And they cited programs like Prospector and the beginning of basing studies and all of this kind of whole new generation of young scientists and, young pups have come up the ranks and are now gnashing at the with the bit in their teeth to go out there and do what NASA used to do. And they have all had the rug ripped out from under them.
Yeah, this is like whiplash. Here's why we should go to the moon. Here's why we're considering returning to the moon. Here's what we think is on the moon. We think it can sustain life. We're not going.
Yeah. It's like Europa. Remember Europa?
Of course.
Remember the wonderful program that Ted did, acknowledging me at the top, and Wes Hunter sitting there saying, we're going to put these submarines down, we're going to prowl around this ocean, and who knows what we're going to find, and, examine the species. And to this day, NASA announced it was canceling the Discover missions being in the pipeline in competition for the limited slots for NASA funding to go to Europa.
Correct again.
This is a clear indication, boys and girls, if you don't understand, double speak 101. When the government says one thing and does another, follow what they do, don't follow what they say. What they say are lies and propaganda. What they do is actually what's going on. And what they're doing is canceling NASA. Now remember, several months ago, we had some pretty amazing reversals from Doug and Dave. No, from Don Savage and Ray Villar.
Yes.
And, David Oates, God bless him, is probably a national treasure. Because without him, we would not have out of their own mouths in a voluminous stream now, which can be correlated with photographs and memos, a lot of other data, the absolute truth as their subconscious is telling us, despite what their words are saying forward. And remember one of those peculiar reversals that made no sense at all, where either it was Savage or Millard who said something about, I can't remember this because I don't have the web in front of me. They're killing NASA slowly.
Yes.
Well, it now makes awful sense. A lot of things are making awful sense tonight, Art. One of the things that I have been asked to tell you and the audience is when I talk with David is that tonight, in the middle of his analysis of the Clinton reversals in the speech, he and Karen got notice that they are being sued for $500 million for the house that was burned out from under them.
Oh my God.
And the reason is negligence.
What is the proposition that
they burned it themselves? This is part of an assault. This is part of a war against,
they're charging it arson?
Yeah. But what I'm basically saying is it was their negligence that caused it to get burned down. And what I told David is calm down, we will get you attorneys, we will put this on our show, we will let the American people know what bastards these people are, because they can't stand the light. The cockroaches will scramble if the light is shone on them. And I would hope that, for one thing, Peter Gersten would volunteer his legal services to David and any other attorneys out there that would like to have, maybe the Constitution have one last hurrah before we just all pack it in. Because obviously David can't afford a $500,000 lawsuit.
Obvious.
Obvious. But because remember how we were under attack a few weeks ago?
Of course.
And I discussed it on your show. Well, those people ran like terrified cockroaches from the light. And we got our tapes back. I want to announce tonight that we got the Phoenix tapes back. And we are proceeding to edit the next in the series of the videos that Enterprise has been putting out over the last several years.
When do you expect that to be complete?
Not at least within the next couple of months, all right? There's so many things going on, and we want to do it right. And obviously now we have to factor in the whole political spin here, which is on the one hand, NASA's telling folks, oh, we're going to give you the pictures. On the other hand, they're basically locking us into a prison on this planet.
Quarantine again is the word that comes to mind. I can actually imagine a number of reasons why we would be possibly quarantined or be ordered to be quarantined. I'm not exactly sure how this would come down. I'm sure that NASA would have received word in some way or another.
Well, there are more reversals in Clinton. And again, with David's permission, what he did was he went to the end of the speech and he was dead tired just before he collapsed to get up tomorrow morning and tape Hillary on Good Morning America and to do two famous speeches which are being given in Pennsylvania and in Wisconsin. Because obviously we're not getting the truth forward. Maybe we can get it backward. He did two more reversals at the end of the speech. Remember the part about John Glenn?
Yes.
All right. Well, on the president's mind, subconsciously, was something that connected with what he said the other night to Jim Lehrer. Remember your discussion last night with Jim Mars?
Of course.
And the to hell with the earth, the desert will answer.
That's right.
Or the desert answers. I forget the exact phraseology.
Close enough.
Pretty chilly. Because here's a president supposedly worried about, illicit affairs, and he's actually thinking on a mega scale. Not to hell with his job or to hell with people or whatever, to hell with the earth. Which of course connects with what we have been tracking from other sources for several months now. This president knows an awful lot about the big picture and is very good at keeping his counsel, except from David Oates. By the way, David will not tell you this, but when he reversed back McCarthy the other day,
Yes.
he did not put this on his website because David is very, frankly, David's pretty humble. He's always something extraordinarily important, and David has kept his head and has kept his cool, and that's why I value him as a researcher, as a colleague, and as a friend. But McCarty says crystal clear, watch out for David Oates in reverse at yesterday morning's press conference.
Well, now,
Which means they're watching David Oates.
well, there's a lot I've got to catch up on here.
Yes, you do. But you remember Mr. Wells, make no wine before it's time.
Yes.
David is an overworked researcher who desperately needs additional help. He's doing all this while trying to maintain that business and his therapy, and he's overworked and underloved and overstressed. So I would recommend we give him at least a couple of days to go through this, make sure it's correct, and not put pressure on him, and it will be there when we're all ready, all right? That's my recommendation. In the part about John Glenn, just before the end of the speech, in reverse, Clinton says again, and you put these up on the web so we can all hear them, your life, see a war, see a war.
Well, I can see one coming.
And that, of course, connects with what's going on with Saddam Hussein.
Right.
And is it bigger than Saddam Hussein? Remember, we are looking, from Enterprise perspective, at the largest imaginable scope here, which is the true history of the human species, remnants of ancient, glorious cultures that are probably human-derived in the rest of the solar system, on the moon, on Mars, and a government agency which tripped over this 30 years ago, and because of Brookings didn't know how to tell the rest of us, and succeeding administrations which have gotten deeper and deeper into the miasma of the in-crowd knowing something and the out-crowd knowing nothing. And now we're at a point where you have to factor in that maybe we're not just looking at ruins, there may actually be guys running around in spacecraft. And the reason I can say that is because we have NASA videos showing extraordinary activity that is non-Newtonian, is definitely not ice crystals, and we actually have evidence of some kind of stuff going on upstairs, pyrotechnics. they were shooting at other things, which should not be happening.
No, we should not be shooting at them.
So when Clinton says to hell with the earth, the desert will answer, it gave me an awful chill. And tonight he says, your life, see a war. And then NASA feels lost with it. What you don't know, but you're about to find out, is that there was a spacecraft, a NASA spacecraft, launched a year ago, that came by the Earth a couple days ago on January 23rd. At around 10:23 in the morning, it made its closest approach to the Earth. It came back to the Earth, in other words.
Using the Earth as a slingshot.
Exactly. Using it as a gravitational slingshot to propel it on to its eventual rendezvous in 1999 with an asteroid, 433 arrows.
My understanding was it might have been possible to have seen the spacecraft making its close approach.
This was telescopes or with the naked eye or something. Well, actually, it's 10:23 in the morning. But here's where things get really squirrely. Because remember, we've been tracking a bizarre NASA pattern based on rituals going back to ancient Egyptian mythology.
Right.
We've been doing it with a computer. In fact, if you've got Redshift,
Oh, I do.
you want to set it up there, take the cues off the website, and run the program yourself and see what happens. It's just astonishing how this has become the code key. This is kind of like when the Brits and we broke the German code with Ultra and the Japanese code in World War II. We can read their minds. It's a whole other tool because they're operating on this ancient Egyptian ritual pattern. Well, I plugged in the numbers for the NEAR, the NEAR mission, which is the asteroid mission encounter on the 23rd.
Yes, sir.
And the reason I did this is because as part of the NASA PR, it was revealed that it was going to encounter the Earth at 10:23 a.m. local time, passing 330 miles. That's 33. 33 is an important secret society Egyptian number. There are 33 degrees of masonry, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
330 miles above where? The closest approach.
Well,
All the possible places on Earth that it could have swung closest to the Earth.
Egypt.
You're close.
Sorry, let's see. Close, I'm close.
You're very close.
Hit me with it.
The boundary between Iraq and Kuwait.
Well, I was close. Middle East, anyway. All right, hold on, Richard. We'll be right back. And we are going to open. You have questions. We'll be right back. Shocked, almost wordless. Davido's facing a $500,000 lawsuit with regard to the destruction of his house. Richard C. Hoagland reporting to us that NASA plans to eliminate all Moon Mars projects and virtually quarantine Earth. Just a remarkable set of developments, and we're going to get phone lines open here shortly and invite you to ask questions of Richard. I think sometimes he is best, as you all know, when he's pinned down a bit. Absolutely fine. To Richard C. Hoagland. Richard, you're back on the air again. What a morning. All right, you mentioned you have one more thing you want to get out before we go to calls.
Yeah, it's very important to understand that all of this has to be viewed against the context of this political initiative that Steve Bassett, Stephen Greer, and I, and many others have been attempting in Washington vis-a-vis this White House. And the model that Bassett has, that I have disagreed with privately, in a very, good way. I mean, people can disagree and respect each other, and, of course, and keep going. And I keep trying to tell Steve, my dear friend Steve, that it's not a level playing field. And at some level, Stephen has to believe, in order to be effective in that weird world inside the Beltway in Washington, that it is a level playing field. That we're dealing with people who are politically naive and don't know the game, and if you simply educate them, they'll come to the, quote, correct decision. And so he was taking the lead because of certain, developments here on this last-minute effort to get to the president and get to the staff of the White House, as he described last night, a briefing sheet that basically laid out some options for the president to use in tonight's speech that would basically capture the imagination of the country and the world, and at least invite potential hearings with all these witnesses on the UFO front and on the NASA ET artifacts front to come and present their evidence in the next several months. And I gently kept telling him, Stephen, it ain't going to work because it's not a level playing field. Well, tonight, I have what I would consider to be compelling proof, David's reversals notwithstanding, that the fix is in. And it goes back to those lunar charts that we have been developing, the sky charts, the celestial programs from Redshift,
Yes.
of this ancient ritual pattern. Because I ran the pattern for Washington tonight during the speech, okay? Now imagine you're standing in Washington and you're looking, south of the Capitol over the southern part of the sky, and it's clear in Washington, you can see the stars.
Yes.
The speech started at 9 o'clock, or about 9:05, 9:08, right?
Right.
At 9:35, Sirius, which is a key participant in this cosmic drama vis-a-vis the Egyptians, reached 33 degrees elevation above the horizon. That magic 33 again, okay? And then as we're moving up toward 10 o'clock, and I'm watching, at 10:04, when he gets to the Saddam Hussein part, basically saying, Saddam, we're going to war. You're not going to get away with this. The world is watching. You can't ignore the world. Remember that part?
Of course.
At that exact moment, literally at 10:04, when he's saying that, in the east, rising is Leo, the lion, the Sphinx. It stands for Mars in the Egyptian cosmology, the god of war. And Regulus, the king, the heart of the lion, is precisely at 33 degrees.
All of the symbology, and of course, as you know, I asked Zahios if he thought anything in Egypt was based on this symbology, and he gave me a great big Egyptian no way.
Well, Mr. Hawass, Dr. Hawass was lying, flat out lying. Let me give you the denouement here. He'll end the speech at 10:24, right?
Yep.
How do we know that? Because good old CNN puts down on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen a running chronology.
Yes.
At 10:24, my program and Bill's program coincide, and bingo, that's when Sirius reached precisely the meridian. He stopped that speech because he's facing, remember, across the house, on the back wall above the doors, there's this big clock, right?
Yes.
He brought that speech to a close exactly when Sirius reached the meridian.
Right on the
ISIS, right on the money.
All right, Richard, let us go to some calls. First time caller line, you're on the air with Richard C. Hoagland. Hello.
Hello, this is Sebastian in Phoenix.
Yes, sir.
How's it going?
It's fine.
Listening to you all the time at work. Two questions for Richard. First of all, I do like your show. I've heard Richard a couple of times. I have a computer, that's how I listen to you because my radio doesn't pick up real well.
Thank you.
I'm sure that Richard's aware that the president doesn't write his own speeches, so you're not really reading his mind. You're reading the people who write the speeches' minds. And he has a whole staff, right?
Good point.
Well, Paul Bagala was one of the key inputters, but remember, it's not what's on the paper. It's what he's thinking about when he's reading what's on the paper. And if you watch the close-ups tonight, I saw more jaw action and more jaw muscle action on Bill Clinton than I've ever seen before. Well, that's because he's nervous, not because... Well, he was under great emotional stress. But if you follow how David Oates' work works, right, when the subject is stressed and is emotionally, distraught, the reversals are more frequent and are clearer because the right-hand side of the brain in his model is able to predominate over the more metonymic logical left-hand side, which of course is more controlled. So it's the stress level that gives you the indication regardless of what's written on the page.
Okay, but here's my question. If you're reversing the speech, then you're...
No, you're reversing what he is saying, and this gets into a whole discourse on how does it work. And for that, I'll refer you to the real audio archives of David Oates' programs.
Okay, well, I'll look at this thing on your my other point, then I'll hang up on
Well,
that.
I think you're not that familiar with David Oates' work.
Every time I go on our web page, I always want to access it. I'm always looking to live, and You got to take live versus research and all that. But I'm interested. I'm skeptical, however.
All right. Question?
Yeah, my other point is that if Bill Clinton, you say, like 32 degrees and you go on about this, if he can plan this all perfectly, it's funny, you would think that he could at least plan his thing with Monica Lewinsky a little better and not get caught. He's that smart, you could think that.
All right, well, let's get Richard to comment on that. Monica Lewinsky, the whole thing, it's not a coincidence that it occurs now, is it?
We're living in a world of ambiguity. It would be wonderful if we had crystal clear evidence. But we're living in this world where you have to make reasoned judgments. I know that our January 5th show, where we basically laid out the case for this administration, interested in this subject matter that was not generally known, confirmed by Webster Hubbell's book, confirmed by Stephen Greer briefing the head of the CIA, all right? Whether it's real ignorance of the issue or feigned ignorance in an effort of the administration to get out in front, they call it plausible deniability.
Absolutely.
It almost doesn't matter. The fact is that there was a positioning of the administration in a public way that was setting us up for potentially an open door. And we walked through that door and we did one hell of a show that night. Everyone participating, right?
Oh, yes.
That show was, I FedEx copies of that show that we pulled directly off the satellite back to Bassett. Bassett had copies made. We papered the Hill. 535 copies of your show wound up in every senator and congressman's office, okay? We know from our sources, Greer sources and others, that the response from the Arkdell audience, 20 million people who are listening to us right now, was overwhelming and overwhelmingly positive. The tens of thousands of faxes and emails hit those committee chairmen all over the Hill. We do not have a read on how many went into the White House, but every indication going into the week before the speech was that if it was going to happen, this was when it's going to happen. And then in the wee dawn hours of January 20th, which, by the way, is a crucial date on this ritual Egyptian calendar, of course, it corresponds to 19.5, right? And we'll do a show where we actually lay this out in great enunciating detail sometime. But on 19.5, suddenly all hell breaks loose and a 2-ton elephant is plunked down in Bill Clinton's lap. Now we have this morning, actually yesterday morning, we have Hillary sitting on NBC saying it is a vast right-wing conspiracy.
Yes.
She didn't say Republican, she said right-wing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we won't get into that in some other program. The point is that from the White House itself and from the First Lady, there is indication of what we suspect, which is this was not just an accident. This was timed to basically jerk this president's chain and say, look, Bill, if you go beyond the edge of the paper, there's going to be all hell to pay. And I've been watching over the last week the most remarkable shenanigans, up to and including that Dallas Herald story last night that went out there and suddenly is retracted.
Dallas Morning News, yeah.
Dallas Morning News. What I'm going to go out on the limb here and make a fearless prediction that in the next day or so, Ken Starr's case disappears. He will not give Monica the immunity that she wants. He will not prosecute her. She will stand pat. And this has been a holding pattern to see if Bill was going to do the right thing, stay with the party line, or whether he was going to break cover. Now, what's the independent correlation that we're onto something? Upstairs in orbit. The Mir space station was visited a couple of days ago by Endeavour. They are still docked. And David Wolf, former astronaut, current astronaut, formerly on Mir for 4 months, was going to come home. And Andy Thompson, who's the new guy, is going to replace him for the next 4 months. The night they arrive, the morning they arrive, suddenly NASA tells the world, whoops, the Russian spacesuit doesn't fit.
That's right. As a matter of fact, the Russians were angry.
They were pissed. They were furious. Gentlemen, boys and girls, come on, let's all grow up. This is a code. They were given an alert. It was kind of like, if the president is going to be dumb enough to do this stupid thing and let part of this cat out of the bag, we're going to get you guys home down below the atmosphere quicker than you can say scat because it ain't going to be healthy upstairs. This is a projection. This is a model, all right? 12 hours later, yesterday morning, just before the speech, the day of the speech, suddenly, Thompson says, well, you know, we pulled out a couple of straps and we did this, and, well, you know, the damn thing fits.
Right.
Now, that's insane. I mean, no one in their right mind as an engineer is going to believe that you're going to send a man.
Call the wildcard lines, area 702-727-1295. We can. You know what I recall, Richard? I recall that there was a woman who was supposed to go to orbit with Mir and did not go because the spacesuit would not fit. That's right.
Yeah, I forget her name, but there was in the and it was part of this whole. You know, is it safe? Is it not safe? And they substituted another. In fact, Wolf was substituted for her. Okay, because the spacesuit didn't fit.
Right.
But the point is that you don't wait until you get them into orbit. You spend $500 million with the shuttle getting them there, and then suddenly find out that, whoops, you spelled it wrong. So I interpreted this as a code. And the reason it was a spacesuit as a code, I mean, they could have used anything, right? Code words, I'm sure they have code words for emergencies. Like when you're walking through an airport and you hear someone say, well, Mr. Thompson, please come to the front desk. The security guys know that Mr. Thompson, of course, means terrorists are all over the damn airport, right? The reason the spacesuit was a code is because spacesuit is synonymous with safety. And you need your spacesuit if somebody's going to start shooting. And why would they start shooting? Go back and look at the NASA video. SCS-80 and SCS-48, we've got guys doing stuff upstairs that, frankly, is not in anybody's space program that I ever read about. So, look, bottom line is we are being lied to up, down, left, right, and Mr. Clinton is up to his eyebrows in this. And the Monica Lewinsky thing is one hell of a diversion and something to threaten him with. And my bet is, my projection is, now that he's been a good boy, now that we've simply had vanilla for our State of the Union, and everything is fine, and oh yeah, we threatened Saddam, that you're going to see Ken Starr go back into his kennel, and you're going to see the Paula Jones thing move forward, and the Lewinsky problem will simply melt away.
It would appear that way at this point. I feel that they've offered a proffer, as you know, a kind of a sketch of what she would say if she testifies, and my understanding is that does not include supporting the perjury statements or anybody asking her to lie or anything of that sort. And so, of course, you don't really have a legal case for anything. Is that?
Well, what you've got here is you've got these tapes between her and I love the way they keep calling Tripp her friend. Now, the friends like that, you know.
He means enemies, you know.
I have a question. You've got an obvious Bush operative in Linda Tripp, identified, attacked by Bennett, put over in the Pentagon, a hostile person. You then have a young, we'll assume, you know, the public record, a young, naive intern who they want to move out of the White House. Have you ever been to the Pentagon?
I have not, no.
All right, it used to be the world's largest building until NASA built the vertical assembly building down at Cape Canaveral.
Right.
It is a huge, sprawling complex with multiple layers and corridors, and you can get lost. I mean, there are people that have been there 10 years that get lost, all right? So you send this one person over, you know, after the Vince Foster thing. And then a year or two later, you send this other person, Monica, over. And guess what? They wind up in the same office. Now, who in their right mind put these two women together in the same office so that they could talk to each other on the phone? In other words, this smells to high heaven, boys and girls. It was a diversion, and what happened tonight was because the decision was made not to go beyond the edge of the paper. We have been quarantined.
Quarantined. Wildcard line, you're on the air with Richard C. Hogan.
Hi, Art. This is Brad in Paulsville.
Hi, Brad.
And
Morning, Brad.
I'm glad to have you doing this tonight. It is high time.
Yes, sir.
And Yeah, Dick, I have a question. I have not been hearing anything about this quarantine that's going on. I mean, like, this is a surprise to me.
It was to me too.
And
well, Gannett ran it, I think, in the last couple of days, and one of my excellent sources who I would, I like acknowledging people, but I would like to preserve this source potentially for other useful tidbits. So I will not mention them on the air tonight, but we have a very efficient, very effective, very vigilant team out there, and they funnel important data and intelligence back to us. And as soon as it came across my fax machine, I zipped it over to Art because I thought he might be interested, and I was right.
well, this is quite nerve-wracking for those of us who are hoping for a Mars mission.
Well, remember, guys, I've been telling you, you can't trust them. You must do this ourselves. We have got to get to the bottom of this, and we're not going to be able to send private missions out there because, remember, NASA's officially canceling all missions to other places. If a private group was trying to put together a mission, as I discussed some years ago, it would be shot down. We are quarantined. This cinches it.
Oh, well, one begins to feel a little bit like Galileo here. Is one permitted to say that the fecal material has already struck the rotary air oscillator?
One is permitted to say that, yes.
Okay. Well, good. Keep up the good work, Dick. I'll be in touch.
Thanks.
All right, take care. It certainly has, and that is the way you can put it, Richard.
Thank you.
East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Richard C. Hoagland. Not a lot of time to the top of the hour.
Richard, one thing I wanted to say, the TWA 800s, local news ran a story that this Eastwick Airlines, whatever it was, they played the pilot's voices, and he saw a light coming toward him.
Right.
And he turned on his landing lights, and that was apparently before the plane blew up. And the network news did not carry that. My local station, CBS station, carried it. Anybody has caught that, and has a tape of that. But let me ask you a question, Richard.
Okay.
The place on Mars, the picture.
Yes.
I see two of them in the same picture. Over to the lower right, there's a face rock, there's another rock, and then there's a miniature which looks exactly like the big one.
Send me a sketch, all right?
I don't have a sketch of it.
Well, make one.
Oh, I can't draw, but if you look at that photograph from the flashing, and the flashing was...
You have my book.
No, I don't.
All right, just start there. Get my book.
Okay.
Xerox it, take it, draw over it, do an overlay, and then fax it to me.
All right. We'll have them do that. There certainly is one face there, and then there are a number of objects that would have a relationship to what's at Giza in Egypt, right?
Yeah, the geometry is exact.
All right. We've got another hour, and so if you've got questions, we've got Richard C. Hoagland here on Quarantine Earth. I'm Mark Bell. A question, long-standing. Art, please tell us, or have Richard tell us over the air, where in the world can we get Redshift? I've heard Richard talk about it so many times. I've been dying to get a copy. Can't find it in Kansas City, even at the CompUSA Superstore. Please. Tell us, the audience, where we can get Redshift and a ballpark figure on what it costs.
It's $59. It should be available in any good computer software store. The copy we got for you, which was sent to you, 6 months ago, something like that?
At least, yes.
Yeah, we got it here in Albuquerque. It's made by the Maris Corporation. It's actually a former Soviet Union program,
No, I have no idea.
There's an awful lot of Russian programming involved in this. It's really excellent. It uses the JPL of Maris for the solar system positions, because there's been very close cooperation between the two space programs. And it's now in its second, modern version, Redshift 2. It's the Maris Corporation, and they're headquartered in Northern California, in the Bay Area. And that's probably can find it on the web. And in the next break, what I'll do is go downstairs, I'll get the box, and I'll read their website so people can actually go to it and find out how to order the darn thing.
Okay, good. Here comes the...
By the way, there are many other programs that are comparable. The thing that is so stunning about Redshift is it allows you to go to the surface of other planets. and do lap longs on Mars or on the moon. And that's how we got onto this, because we simply looked at the landings and launch times from all the manned and unmanned missions to various places, and you need a program that has that capability, otherwise you're limited to just the Earth.
Well, obviously, the interest of the constant reference to Richard. First time calling the line, you're on the air with Richard C. Oakland. Hello.
Hi, this is Greg Magassa.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, this whole deal, it seems like a great big disinformation campaign between Clinton and NASA and the moon, the space station, just everything. And
Don't forget John Glenn.
Yeah, John Glenn too. And it seems to me like it's a total subjugation of the United States government. It's not the world community. And that sort of disturbs me. And I'm wondering what kind of fulcrum or coercion do they have here, and why are they doing it covertly instead of overtly if they got all this power?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that gets us into very deep water. Some of the things that Jim Marsh was talking about last night. Look, as you know, I have been extremely reluctant to talk UFOs because, like, you know, we don't do Windows, we don't do UFOs. I backed into this through the artifacts doorway, through the ruins doorway, right? My background was mainstream science, Hayden Planetarium, Walter Cronkite, NASA consultant, you know, squeaky clean, and I used to actually believe these guys. And when I started looking at these pictures from Mars, from the Viking mission, which I was there, I covered, I was, you know, part of the extraordinary experience the summer of 1976, I really believed that it was on the up and up, and that it would be only a matter of time before we knew what's really out there. And I watched, looking in hindsight now, back in time, I watched the most peculiar paradoxes going on around the Viking mission. I watched the NASA people basically chomping at the bit to talk about finding life, and I watched an agency which basically papered over the discoveries of people like Gil Levin, one of the biologists on the 3 biology experiments on Viking. When the experiment came up with positive results, NASA did everything to deny the results. And Levin has written a book, which is not quite within my reach, so I can't read you the title, but it's published by North Atlantic Books, my publisher, and it's basically the inside story of the discovery of microbial life on Mars that the agency in '76 refused to acknowledge. Now you begin to look at this and you say to yourself, wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture? Why have we got, you know, lip service, but when it comes down to the nitty gritty, the agency never does the logical thing? And people have said to me for years, look, Oakland, if you and those other guys are right, if there's a base on Mars or ruins and cities and all that, this would be a gold card for NASA. They would be able to go to the Congress and get bushel baskets of money. And of course, because they could do that, if it's there, they would be doing it, and since they're not doing it, it can't be there. Which is kind of weird reasoning, because it assumes that the reality you see on CNN is reality. It assumes that the logic of the level playing field is in fact the real logic of this weird game. And it's been 15 years now since I first started down this trail. And even without the benefit of David Oates, I have found, much to my awful, awful disappointment, that the honest folks in NASA are being manipulated along with everybody else by the handful that know the game is rigged, that know that the fix is in, that know that we're not free agents, we are not free, we are under some kind of mandate. And for one breathtaking moment, it looked like Bill Clinton was going to kick over the traces.
This case is going to fall apart in front of our eyes sometime in the next few days.
Given that Bill was a nice boy tonight, and given that his jaw muscles were working overtime, and given that the reversals, even the couple at the end that David got, are stunning, I can't wait to hear what David does with the rest of that speech and with the 2 other speeches tomorrow. The world, you know, the so-called real world, think that everything is hunky-dory except for this little nasty scandal. And because Bill is so useful if he plays ball, and it would be a whole new game to put Gore in and to... No, this has to go away, because there's too much. For one thing, we're going to be in the middle of shooting war here in the next few days. And what I'm trying to do now is to use this computer program to possibly project when the damn war is going to begin. Given that we now know that they're on the Egyptian calendar, and that's a very long, detailed conversation which we'll save for another night. we can use the program to predict events here on Earth that are far apart from NASA. That's the stunning new news tonight. That speech was given on the same timetable that John Kennedy gave his speech in 1961 on May 25th in the well of the House when he announced the Apollo program itself.
Absolutely beyond my understanding, Richard.
You got the program. Run it yourself, Art. The numbers cannot lie.
That I can do. Wildcard line, you're on the air with Richard at CO1. Hello.
Good morning, this is Tom in Reno.
Hi, Tom.
Richard, several months ago when you were on the show, we put forth the question to you about the possibility of Carillion photography being used on some of the stuff that comes into the atmosphere here, you know, as a possibility of seeing if the Van Flandern model fits, you know, if that was a large planet, if you could use the Carillion photography on any of that kind of stuff and get any other information.
Well, as I understand it, Carillion photography requires you have a sample in a lab, in an electrostatic setup with a photograph, and you're basically looking for unseen emanations beyond the visible spectrum, which are triggered by the process of the sample in the lab in the experimental setup that you've created. You can't do Carillion photography with remote sensing, but you can't look with a gadget at a planet and find out anything beyond the electromagnetic spectrum that we understand. So that is limited to having a physical sample to work with, to play with.
All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Richard Hoagland. Hello.
Hello, people. This is Steve from South Dakota.
Hi there.
Morning, Steve.
Hi, Richard. I just called to give a comment and then I have a question. I want to say, first of all, bravo to the Enterprise mission. Richard and the Enterprise mission deserve maximum support for the work that they've done on the Mars and the Sidoni work. I follow the politics and the data very, very closely. And I've seen that Richard since 1983 and his crew have worked very, very hard to get to the truth. And I applaud the work. The truth is there. And I believe that Richard has done more for bringing all of this data to the public more than anybody has. Richard, I've talked to you about this before. I was listening to Bill Harwood of CBS. He's a CBS, science correspondent.
Right.
And
he heard you in one of the air-to-ground interviews with the astronauts a couple days ago.
Right. On the 5th of January, he was discussing Prospector, and the reason was that there are no cameras aboard, saying the reason was because, Lunar Orbiter and, Prospector, or Lunar Orbiter and Apollo had already gotten all the data, and that this mission was, prioritized for different reasons. It seems to me that a $63 million mission should have a damn camera. At 60 miles, at a 60-mile projected orbital altitude, they'd be able to get some remarkable pictures if they go over some of the sites that we've looked at. And they even projected toward the end of the mission going down to about 6 miles. Why do you think that they have a camera there?
Well, this is like tea leaf reading. This reminds me of when the CIA used to try to predict what the Kremlin was going to do back during the good old days of the Cold War. The simple answer is that cameras and images really produce tremendous bandwidth problems. And bandwidth and processing images translates to a lot of money that they don't have. And the stated objective here was to get the geophysical data from the neutron, information, the gamma ray information, the composition, to look for the water, to look for, minerals and unusual distribution of materials on the moon's surface. And with the camera data that you had from Clementine, the DoD mission that went up in '94,
right,
had given us 2 million images. So why would you be redundant with an NASA mission, which would have another camera to take more images, because things don't change on the moon? I mean, the rate of change on the moon is very, very, very small and has not changed between 94 and 98. That's the common sense approach, okay? The more interesting arcane interpretation is that you had a DoD mission, which falls under security and black budgets, 2 million pictures, all the high-res pictures of which we've never seen. And with the open NASA mission under the Space Act, which ostensibly is supposed to make it, non-classified and available to anybody, you wouldn't put a camera on that because then anybody could look at those pictures and might find things they weren't supposed to find. So by segregating the two missions, what you do in the behind closed doors is match the two data sets. You take the data from Prospector, which shows you where all the good stuff is, the minerals and the composition, and you match it with the secret maps made from the high-res pictures from Clementine, and the guys in the back room say, oh, wow, Sally, look at that city down there, look what it's made of, and there's the titanium, and there's where the water is, and there's what, that kind of thing. Now, we're going to try to do that because what NASA's done on their website up at Ames is to put live data from Prospector, the gamma ray readouts and the neutron readouts and the reflectometer readouts and all that. They will not let you download this data. One of our guys the other day called them or emailed them and said, why don't you allow, downloading? They said, well, we don't want the public to have too much control over this data. A bizarre statement from the webmaster at NASA Ames. But there are ways to do screen capture, and I would heartily recommend to folks that are listening to us tonight, for God's sake, get a dedicated computer, get a read-write CD-ROM, set up your program so you do a screen capture, and every 20 seconds as this data is coming in from Prospector, download and save the data, and then make a copy and send it to us. Because we don't have the wherewithal, because we're up to our eyebrows in these legal problems. You don't have the $2,000 that it would require to do a dedicated system. That's how we've been backed into a corner. We're not quite at the $500,000 level mark like poor David tonight, but we're having our own legal problems, and we could use some help on this, and we ought to diversify and democratize this anyway. The point of fact is that it's all irrelevant if we've been quarantined. If NASA really is calling a shuttering halt to any plans to go beyond low Earth orbit with men, then what the heck are we doing up there? Why is John Glenn going to go up and risk his life? Why is Bill Clinton painting this expansive picture about a space station, which is going to basically go around and around and around and around and do nothing? When the solar system beckons and we are basically killing all means of going out there, doing anything beyond what we've been doing for 30 years here at Earth.
Indeed. Western Rockies, you're on the air with Richard C. Hoagland. Hello.
Well, good morning, gentlemen. This is First Molecular.
Yes, sir.
This might be wrong, of course, but I'm curious what the meaning is on Mars rover, the swastika and skull and crossbones scheme, and what's it explain all this? Oh, hang up the lesson.
Well, see, what we need to do, Art, is a show where we basically do the politics that we figured out from the Pathfinder. And I would prefer not to get into that tonight because it's so deep and so complex, and we're in the process of assimilating our data. We've had people, as you know, in the archives looking at NASA history and the history of what happened after World War II and the formations and the creation of JPL.
It goes back to a lot of what Jim Morris said yesterday as well.
Yes, absolutely. And Jim and I are now comparing notes, and we have found that we have come to some stunningly correlating conclusions by completely separate doorways, which is when you know you're onto it. When independent research comes up with the same answer, but by different means, you know you're on the process. So I would prefer to defer. I'm not ducking the question. It's a critically important question, but it would take us far afield, and we do not have time at 3:27 New Mexico time to get into it in any depth.
All right. We don't have time to get anything into any depth on anything right now. We've got a pause here at the bottom of the hour. And again, the story of the evening is we apparently are quarantined. No moon, no Mars, no manned missions. I'm Marvell. This is Coast to Coast AM. Richard, again, with respect to the quarantine, if we have been, in effect, shooting at these things out there, wouldn't that justify an effective quarantine?
Well, but remember, we've got a video that goes back to 1991, the STS-48 video.
Yes.
which is on, the end of my UN briefing, one of the videos that we, offer through our website. And if we had a serious problem, in other words, we're dealing with hostile aliens, as some have, tried to get us to imagine.
Yes.
You'd imagine that it would have been dangerous up there at least beginning in September of 1991. This is January of 1998. And as far as I know, every shuttle mission that's gone up has come down in one piece. There's also, if you look at the STS-80 footage, which, by the way, you have, and I would strongly recommend that when you get some rest tomorrow, you rack it up and you run it down to the end.
I've seen it all.
Yeah, well, you have your own copy there. Run it down to the end where those funny things make the triangles over the horizon.
Right.
And remember the flash. There's a flash on the screen, on the camera.
Unforgettable.
Identical to the flash on STS-48.
Correct.
1 second, 1.5 seconds later. Slow it down. Do it frame by frame. You will see something at very high velocity enter the Earth's atmosphere, tangential, meaning going away from the shuttle, 1,500 miles away, moving at roughly 1,000 miles per second, which is the same velocity of the weapons we saw being deployed on STS-48.
That's right.
So we have a consistency. What's astonishing, if we're dealing with a real war upstairs, is that the guys who are firing the weapon miss their targets by 40 miles. How do we know it's 40 miles? Because if you look at the airglow layer, that's about 40 miles above the actual horizon of the Earth. That's your scale for those pictures. Look at those triangles or little dots with your really spacecraft zipping around under electrogravitic drive. Somebody's spacecraft, ours, theirs, who knows. And the shot, the weapon that's fired at them, misses them by one airglow layer width, about 40 miles and 1,500 miles distance. Now, I don't care how bad shots we are, you can't miss with this high-tech weaponry by 40 miles. So I have been strongly inferring from this that we're dealing with a sham, with a fake.
Or a shot across the bow.
Possibly, but remember, this is 1996 in December when we get the STS-80 video, and we get very similar shots that were right aimed at the darn things in 1991. It was kind of late in the game to be shooting across the bow.
Well, it is, but I'm just trying to imagine any reason for an effective quarantine.
Well, I don't think it has to do with spaceships. I think it has to do with knowledge, data. Remember, what has to be preserved here at all costs is the status quo. Human beings, Homo sapiens, in the Vox Populi, in the democratic mold, cannot be allowed to know that its future and its past are not what it's been told it is. So it's not that it's dangerous up there in this model. It's that the knowledge is dangerous. The information is dangerous. The way I see it, for the last 30 years, there was a very tiny inner crowd that controlled this information, from the lunar orbiters and the surveyors and Project Apollo. One of those key people who's no longer with us is Gene Shoemaker.
Oh, yes.
I knew Gene very well. Gene was a good guy, right? I cannot, absolutely will not believe that Gene was part of the dark side, if you want to put a dark side on it. But I think that good guys can be spun. I mean, if you present good guys with an option, then it's either keep your counsel, keep the secrets, or horrible things will befall the human race. Most good guys will go along with a cover-up to preserve the human race, right?
I would think so.
Yeah. And they're going to do it for the right reason. But eventually, after 10, 20, 30 years, and nothing bad is happening, maybe some of these good guys get to the point where, hey, wait a minute, we were told this, and, it's now decades later, and this hasn't happened. And I think we're beginning to see from a lot of sources, Greer and some of our sources and NASA's activities and others, that the cover-up is falling apart from within. If that's true, then the next tier, the next level, the guys that thought the game was going one way, and they're not beginning to find out it's going another way, they would want to get their own information. So you'd have this second tier of NASA that would basically want to go back and find out for themselves. They're not going to trust us, right? Right. You look at all the horrible propaganda directed against our activities. But at least we sensitized, if this model is correct, the inner circle, so they would go and get the missions funded to go and find out the ground truth. Well, what's astonishing is that in the heyday of NASA's renaissance, when all the indicators should be that it's up and out and away, suddenly there's this screeching halt. This tells me, and it should tell any thinking person, that there's something really bizarre going on between the words and the music. There's a gap here. And the gap has got to be that the honest folks now, the next year, has found out, surprise, surprise, there's stuff out there, and we can't tell everybody else.
All right. First time caller line, your turn with Richard Hoagland. Hello. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't press the button. First time caller line. Now you're on the air with Richard C. Hoagland. Hello.
Hey, I'll remain anonymous in Virginia. Providence had me turn you on my FM stereo at 2:30 in the morning Eastern Standard Time. And I've been glued to it ever since. I'm young. I was introduced to all of this Molinar's work about 3 years ago. And the way I understand it is that the publishing of that book with Pietro, you'll have to forgive me if I get any of these names wrong, effectively ruined his life. I don't know if you know what Greg Molinar does these days.
Well, I know that he left Goddard, he went back to Minnesota. I think his dad had a computer firm, and I lost track of it myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll leave all that out of it because it's personal. I have close relations with a number of the Molinars, and I'm just wondering, what do you think this is going to do to these people's lives? I mean, it's interesting that they say that they're going to go ahead and credit it to, will it be to Pietro and the group or just him? And obviously he's been able to fare well out of this. But like I said, from the way I understand it, and from a number of outsiders' point of views, that this whole thing ruined Greg's life. And I don't know about the other three guys that worked on the project with him. Do you think maybe some type of vindication is going to end up for, and even the guys in the past who originally worked with the Viking mission?
My honest answer is I do not know. Up until this news story from Gannett came in today, I had at least an optimistic chance that in fact now that the worm was going to turn and that NASA was going to try in its inimitable fashion to bring us partial disclosure but control it tightly by nominating Pietro as their spokesperson. And I can live with that because we've got to know. The problem now is we've got this contradictory piece of data, which basically is this gentleman says, I am directing the centers effective immediately to issue termination notices for all contractual vehicles associated with beyond Earth orbit activities, such as human, lunar, or Mars exploration. That is such a scary, fearful tone. It's like we are ducking down with our tail between our legs, we're coming home, and we're not going to peep our head out from under this rock until something blows over. This does not bode well for disclosure.
No, it does not. Wildcard line, your turn with Richard C. Hoagland. Hello.
Hello, this is Dan in Virginia. Hi, Richard.
Hi there.
There's three things that I'd like you to help me tie together. My first premise is that we're going to war, possibly, not against Saddam, but there's underground bases there that we may be after is my main premise. And I wanted to ask you about that. And then secondly, you got the prophecies that, refer to Babylon, which is Iraq, in the current term.
Yes.
And then thirdly, the desert that President Clinton referred to in the reverse speech.
The desert will answer you. Yeah, I think your intuition is onto something here. I am loath to lay out a specific scenario because, frankly, I don't know what the scenario is. I only know, given the data sets we have, the convergence between our work with the computer, with the archive search, with some of the leaks that we've had from NASA people over the last several months, and David Oates' work on the reversals, which is stunningly correlative, and yet we've done double blind so that we're not telling each other what we're finding, then it's not as advertised. And one of the most important things is that Bill Clinton is fully in the loop and fully aware that it's much bigger than anybody would dare imagine. And all night tonight, as he's giving that speech, his mind is working furiously on things that had no business being in that speech. And that does not bode well for living things, unfortunately.
Eastern Rockies, you're on the air with Richard C. Hoagland. Hi.
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, Mr. Bell, Mr. Hoagland.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering, have you ever read the book, The Gods of Eden by William Brownlee?
Yes, I have.
Yes. Well, it sounds like some of that might be influential in what you're discussing tonight. Also, another thing about the hostility factors supposedly involved with extraterrestrials. The fact of the matter is, if you read the book Flying Close to the Hospital by Brad Steiger and John Weidner, also Confrontations by Jacques Delis, people have been and still are being shocked by those things. And even dying from apparently like radiation poisoning effects.
Well, the thing that impresses me about the shuttle video, which of course is actual first-hand information,
Yes.
that was beamed down to us live. Somebody leaked it. They wanted us to see it. Is that, there's somebody shooting at these things, and the things are not shooting back. This, to me, is extremely important, because that and the mist distances indicate to me that we're seeing almost a staged setup. We're being manipulated by imagery. Gene Roddenberry once said to me, think if it's real, it'll be on television. And it's a very useful, rule of thumb. The master manipulators, I remember Reagan's chief guy for television, I forget his name. Do you remember, Art? He always was staging the perfect photo op.
Oh, yes.
Because images now are everything. Well, the images coming out of NASA are of a war going on upstairs. When I heard David or Andy Thomas couldn't fit the Russian spacesuit, and it was such an absurd excuse after all that money to get there and find the damn suit doesn't fit, I realized that someone was desperately trying to communicate to a lot of people in the NASA loop that there's something really wrong and we're going to kind of wait to see how this falls. And then it fell in the direction that they wanted, and he could stay. And it was only a few hours from the warning to the, okay, we fixed it. We're dealing with codes here. We're dealing with layers of deception. We're dealing with security at various layers. People in the know, people more in the know, people all in the know. I mean, this is a puzzle palace par excellence. And the only thing I can say definitively tonight is that I finally resolved in my own mind whether Bill Clinton is a mindless dupe or is in charge and involved and engaged in what's really going on. And the answer is he's in charge and engaged. And watch him really closely, and let's tape everything that happens, because the truth is not only out there, it's in reverse.
Western Rockies, you're on the air with Richard C. Hoagland.
Thank you, Art. This is Bob in KGX Country.
Yes, sir, Portland.
Yeah, Richard, yes, sir. I've seen some anti-gravity vehicles, and I even talked to Tom Bearden about this a little bit last year. What do you think that possibly they're continuing their exploration with black anti-gravity vehicles and saving their money on the rights that the rest of us see?
Basically, yeah. I mean, it sounds quite obvious to me anyway that beginning certainly in the last 10 years, and probably going back maybe 30 years, that we've had two parallel space programs. We've had the NASA program with all the visibility and all the fanfare, and then we've had the real program. And never the twain shall meet. And the usefulness of the fake program, the program with rockets, shuttles, and flame, and all that, which is primitive compared to electrogravitics, its usefulness is over. And I go back to David's reversals of Savage and Villard, and if you call those up and look at them on David's website, you'll see these NASA guys were not happy campers. They're basically talking about the slow destruction of NASA, and what was the phrase they used? They kill us slowly. It's awful, or something like that.
Something like that, yes.
I mean, my heart goes out to all these people because they believed in the dream like we all did, and we've all been used in the service to something which is dark and mysterious and not on the up and up. And unless we get it out in the light, I mean, we're being manipulated into things here that are going to result in an awful lot of people dying at some point. The question is, for what reason?
That's right. Wild Card Line, you're on the air with Richard Hoagland. Hello.
Hi, Richard?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I was wondering, the caller at the bottom of the hour mentioned the swastika and the skull and bones. When your people do independent research, do they go into, and this may sound kind of weird, like occultic documents, things like that, ritual magic, and
Well, a lot of ritual, that's for sure.
oh yeah, I mean the short answer is yes. You know, my rule of thumb, 15 years ago was I was going to follow this wherever the data lived. And it's gone now politically, it's a pretty arcane and strange places, and a lot of people are very uncomfortable with following us looking into these dark corners. And I must say very resolutely that one of the things that we're discovering, which I'm not comfortable with, but I'm going to follow it wherever it leads, is what I call the Nazi connection. It is there, it is bona fide, it is documentable, and it is correlated with several independent sources. But because it is such a contentious and potentially explosive subject, I want to be absolutely certain that we can document the things that I want to say. And so beyond what is on the web, which is the data direct from Mars, and beyond what I have alluded to in the form of occult and ritualistic practices that go back to the most ancient Egyptian cosmology imaginable, and the obvious connections to some of the SS activities at the end of World War II that we found out about, I really don't think tonight, because we can't document it, there's no time, I want to go beyond that. But art willing, we will in the not too distant future.
Well, Jim Mars, Randolph Winters, many others have made exactly the same connection that you're making.
The interesting thing about Mars, we talked this afternoon, he said, Dick, because I explained to him at some length, the kind of computer way we're doing this. He said, you and I have come to the same conclusion from totally separate directions.
That's right.
And in fact, we're so interested